I'd like to welcome all the children who've joined us today for this wonderful webinar. We're just giving them 2-3 minutes to finally join.
Super.
Welcome to Skoolz. Welcome to Skoolz. Skoolz is an edtech startup which is recognized by the Government of India, which helps schools, training institutes, and trainers meet verified and genuinely interested parents. Skoolz helps parents in searching, exploring, comparing multiple institutes, and scheduling appointments with the schools. It is actively encouraging learning and knowledge development with blogs, webinars, and events. And many leaders from the education sector and other verticals have participated in our webinars. Our panelists have had a great opportunity to connect with our extensive parent community. And we have a very eminent guest today, children, with us, Gita Balakrishnan ji. Namaste and welcome to Skoolz. But before I begin this webinar, let me request all of you who are here to share Google reviews. There is this Google page which says Skoolz, and you go on that and you share a review and you get a star on your certificate. So you can see the Google page, children. Can I hear a yes from all of you? So once you go to the Skoolz page, all you need to do is here, there are 9 reviews here. You need to just write a review and share details about your experience and how you like today's program or any other program that you've attended. And we give you a star on your certificate, which is given by the UN. Here is where you share the details about your experience. And on behalf of the CEO of Skoolz, Mr. Srinivas ji, I extend a very warm welcome to Gita Balakrishnan, a graduate from the School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi. She has completed practical training at the Center for Building Performance and Diagnostics at the Pittsburgh University, USA. She underwent training programs on stabilized mud blocks and other alternative methods of construction at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. And she's worked with an NGO called Avas as a shelter coordinator in the slums of Bangalore. She's now a trustee of Avas, Indian Heritage Cities Network Foundation, and the Ethos Foundation. She believes that architecture is a science which has got a deep connection as well, and buildings and science revealed through the ages, revealed a sound of understanding of science and technology. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am, and it's so wonderful to have you here. You've worked with Gizmo Jails, to name a few, and you've been, completed marathons as well. We'll go on all of that. All of us children have had such, experiences of playing with mud and other things. How would you like to tell them about building sandcastles and fortresses with Lego and all these activities? How do you resonate with this kind of activity and actually going on from there to creation of buildings, maybe?
Thanks. Thank you so much, Nidhi. Thanks, Skoolz. It's always so lovely to be with young minds because they keep me going. And I'm thankful to be here with all of you today. Yeah, so I'm your break, little children, today. I'm Gita Balakrishnan, and I'm going to be your break. Hopefully a welcome one from your classes, your demanding schedules, whatever else bothers your little minds. And my job here today is to take you on a small journey, a journey of imagination. All I ask of you is to let your mind free and allow yourself to be guided. I believe all of you know of Rapunzel, the famous Disney princess who was trapped all her life. Imagine her tower, the tall, scary tower out of which she had no way to escape. So now we know what the writer thought of when he gave Rapunzel her long hair as long as the height of the tower. But now imagine a little variation. What if all of a sudden Mother Gothel threw her into a deep well? Would the storyteller have given her a different superpower? Don't you think so? Yes. Or what if she were an Indian heroine instead of a German one? Which is the tallest tower you have seen in India? Imagine having hair as long as the Qutub Minar. And she may not have been blonde-haired either then. So by the end of this session, maybe you should imagine a Rapunzel who can escape her dungeon. You can give her any trait you want, the longest of legs, sharp talons to dig into the wall that will help her climb, hair as black as night, maybe, whatever you want, go wild with your imagination. Also imagine Harry Potter, the century's most famous teen hero who goes from one place to another, swooshing through chimneys using his special flue power. But if he was born in India, we don't use fireplaces normally to warm us. How would he have traveled? These are questions maybe you could look at asking yourself. I'm going to share screens and show you a few slides. So I'm going to show you a few things really that will give you a glimpse into my world, which is architecture. Look around you, everything is architecture. You look at that anthill, you look at, architects take inspiration from even anthills to design buildings. And hence, everything is architecture. We spend 80% of our lives indoors or in spaces that should be designed. And hence, architecture is an extremely powerful profession. Where did we come from? We used to live in places designed like this, in caves, where people made, dug into caves to make shelters for themselves. And there are places in Turkey, in Cappadocia, even in India, you go to the Ajanta caves. People don't necessarily live in there, but in some parts of the world, people still live in these places. Hotels have been made out of these caves. But this is where we came from. And where are we now? This is how we build today, right? We build more formally. You see homes around you, and even the place you're sitting in, it's very different from the caves we came from. And where are we headed? We're headed to something really gizmo-like in the future. There's going to be, technology is going to play a big role in deciding where we are headed in the future. What kind of materials? Can be man-made materials, can be natural materials. I went on this long walk from Kolkata to Delhi, and to explore design, explore people, explore culture. And if you see, many of the traditional homes were built using natural materials. But today, the homes that we live in, including the one I'm living in, is largely with man-made materials.
Gita ji, we can't see the slides.
Oopsie, how did that happen?
Yes, we can see your page, but not the slides. Can we have that again, please?
Okay, apologies on that. I didn't realize it all. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
You can see, right? So
Yes,
I'm just going to rush through the slides once again, but I'm not going to tell you too much because you heard me speak. So yes, like I said, everything is architecture, whether it's the anthill and the designs inspired by the anthill, as you see this building next to you. And architects actually study the different channels, the routes that ants take within their anthill, and understand how climate is controlled within that anthill and apply that to architecture as well. And this is where we came from, caves, and how people in those days actually carved into those caves and built their homes, spaces, shops, everything within them, and where we've come from now. This is how we build today. A lot more organized. Maybe you actually spend time planning, but earlier days they did plan, but they built as they went. They kind of evolved their designs as well. And this is probably where we are heading to, or a lot further. Just like you're thinking of cars that might fly, buildings are also going to look very different a few years from now. Materials, I was telling you about how materials can be natural. There are, if you go down to villages, you'll see people using everything that they see around them in the forest to build, because that's what was available many years ago. And then how man and people found other materials to build. And now we have a lot of man-made materials as well. How materials are put together. What kind of loads do you design for? There are places where there can be snow. There are places where there's extreme wind, rain, earthquakes. What all do you take into consideration when you design? If anybody here is fond of chemistry, you may know of the carbon-60 isotope. This geodesic dome follows the principle of a carbon-60 isotope. And, it's an interesting inspiration to take from. And there are a lot of people who use geodesic domes to build. Think about how inclusive your school is. When we build, do we look at building for all? Do we look at building for men, designing for men, women, children, the physically challenged, different sections of society who can afford to, can afford certain spaces, who cannot afford certain spaces? Are we looking at designing for everybody? So this is extremely important in my view when we are designing and when we are building. Look at the shapes around you. And lots of these shapes can be used to get inspired to design as well. See these windows. You usually see windows that are just stuck as squares or rectangles in the wall, but you could do wonders with them. This also helps in shading, allowing just the light to come in maybe and protects you from heat. Look at when you go to a theater, a place of drama, look at those places and see how they are designed. What do the actors need? What do the people who are watching you need? They need to be able to hear. They need to be able to watch from wherever they're sitting. All this it's extremely exciting to design these spaces. Look at this. How does a badminton court get designed? Where do the lights need to be? How wide, how big, how much space behind, how high should the ceiling be? There's so much that can get, when you're even working on your hobby, you can start observing how that space is designed. Movies, there are some movies that have showcased architecture, like Spirited Away. I've just shown you a image here. So when you watch a movie, more recently, Parasite is another movie that had a lot of architecture in it. But when you watch a movie, there are ways in which you can start observing those spaces and see how even those sets have been designed. Look at Hogwarts and the herbology class or the Chamber of Secrets. And, it'll be really nice to look at it from the perspective of design and architecture as well. There are many books that have been written on architecture. There's this Architect's Apprentice. It's for young adults really, but if you're interested in, there is a young adult attending this, I think the Architect's Apprentice is really nice to read as a book. So I think with that, I will hand it over to Nidhi. I'm sure there are a lot of questions that you will have. I just wanted to give you a peek into our beautiful world of design and architecture. And
I loved what you said about Harry Potter, and I loved the windows that you showed about what is next in architecture. I'm sure all our little minds and children are enthralled by the same. Gita ma'am, just like animals and birds have their unique places to live, we all have homes, usually built for us by someone of different sizes, of different shapes and colors. How can we learn to love and understand our homes better?
I think exactly the way animals do. I think if you start observing how animals build their homes, live in them, it's really something that's so much to learn from. When I went on this walk, I actually took presentations to show little children how the weaver bird builds its nest, how it brings each of those leaves and actually hangs them first and then hangs upside down and builds that nest. How can we also, observe how homes are built? Who builds your home? And then you feel that love for your home. In your own home, you can look at which side the sun comes from at a particular time of day. Follow the sun, go around and, afternoon, where does it go? And then you start correlating things that your home does in sync with nature, and maybe you start redesigning your interiors, put your furniture in a particular way because you like a certain light that comes in at a particular point of day. And there's so much that you can start looking at. I think it's so important to love our spaces to be able to do more with them.
Yes, ma'am. Gita ji, before we continue the conversation further and before we take questions from the children as well, I request you to play a video about it so that the children understand it better. Maybe you could speak a little bit about the video before we show that.
So this video is really giving you a glimpse into a course that we have created. It's called Universe of Architecture. And the Universe of Architecture course was created keeping in mind exactly youngsters like you, for you to understand what our world is like. And it has 3 characters, Seda, Decca, and Theos. And Seda, Decca, and Theos really are 3 children one from the future, one from the past, and one from the present.
How
And
interesting.
and they take
One
you on
from the past, one from the future, and one from the present.
present. And there is a time warp of sorts that happens, and all three of them come together. And they're taking you on a time travel of sorts to different spaces and buildings, teaching you about scale, proportions, color, talking about famous architects and their lives. So yeah, I think it's certainly worth it. And I'll also try and post a link on the chat box for this course. So if anybody is interested, we'd love to have you register for it. And we also translated this course into Hindi and Bengali, and we made it freely available to those along my route, so that even people in villages, etc., understand what design is, and I think that's extremely essential.
Hello guys, hope you are doing well. My friends and I are going on this journey of design and architecture. Would you like to join us?
So, have you ever thought of wanting to be an architect?
Have you ever been intrigued by the buildings that surround you?
Then let us take you to the starting line.
Let us show you what architecture is and what it can be.
The universe of architecture is so much more than the finished product that you see. Buildings, structures, skylines, landmarks. Every day we pass all these different blocks. But what does it take to make buildings from plain rocks? Our homes, our schools, our dining rooms, the sun, the wind, the flowers in bloom. All these play a huge part in our daily lives, defining our day, defining our might. Architects have great tools in their sight. So, walk a mile with the maestros of design, as they tell you what being an architect means. Understand the scope, understand the technicalities, and get the blueprint to work on your dreams. Join Seda, Decca, and Theos as they journey through the universe of architecture in this unique sci-fi motion graphic novel curated especially for the students of class 8th to 12th. Know better to learn better, to understand better the universe of architecture. Contact us today.
So you mentioned about, the world of architecture. I'm sure children are interested. Now on that, I'd like to ask you another question. When we design and construct a building, what all do we need to keep in mind? Like the people who are using it, who are the visitors, those who service the place. All of us have played with all of these. How do we resonate with actual creation of buildings?
Yeah, so I think you talked about people. I'm glad you said that. Very often, the architect's ego is a little huge, and you tend to design more for what you like. But I think you need to realize that we need to, as architects, remember that we're designing for someone who wants to live in that space. So you need to be sure that what you're giving them is what they want first. Secondly, I think every piece of material that you use on the site, every line that you draw on the paper has an implication somewhere, not just on your site, on your building. You're talking about, if you're using a brick, you're affecting the life of someone who's making that brick somewhere, who's probably leaving their children back in their villages and going and working in brick kilns and making those bricks. So I think the materials that you use, the way you design, you need to keep in mind that there are various stakeholders. You need to keep in mind the wind, the earth, what you're doing. Everything that you put on this earth, as we know, is also stress on the earth. So how can you tread lightly on the earth? How can you be careful on the materials that you use, and the way you design, the way you orient it, the lesser air conditioning that would be required is the better it is, and so much more like that. I think all of you, we've all played with mud, built sand castles, fortresses, etc. with Lego. You talked about it a little while ago also. This is something that we do even after we become architects, we are building models. Earlier, it would be by hand. We would use blocks, mud, wood, and things like that. Now, a lot of 3D models, 3D visualization and 3D models are being used. That's another area of expertise that architects are getting into. And these huge buildings that are being built are actually the electrical layouts, the sanitation layouts are all in different layers on 3D softwares. So there's so much of that as well happening. So this an architect is like a person conducting an orchestra, where you have an engineer, you have the sanitation expert, you have a project manager, you have the construction workers on site, and you're putting all that beautiful music together through this building.
How beautiful. Ma'am, how does a child know whether he or she has an aptitude for architecture?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think the bottom line really needs to fit into, you need to be a creative person. You need to be thinking innovatively and creatively. A lot of people are concerned about certain skills that are required, but curiosity and creativity is something that will take you far for sure. There are basic skills that are, you need to, someone is, also asks me, very often I'm asked whether you need to be good at sketching. Sketching is for sure a beautiful tool to have, because your hand, what you do with your hand often reinforces memory as well. And when you go out and sketch a building, you kind of record in your mind what is beautiful about it. And then when you are designing, it kind of comes back to you. So having sketching is an added advantage. These days, there are a lot of computer-aided tools also to get away from this requirement of sketching. But you need science and maths today to qualify for architecture in India in your class 11 and 12. Earlier, a few years ago, they had not made it mandatory. I think you could just do math but science and math are essential to a certain degree, because you need to understand how that structure is going to stand. But at the same time, I think only 50%, you need to score a 50% in class 12 in science and maths to be able to get through. So while you have the interest in science and math, you don't need to be extremely good at it to be able to manage a life in architecture.
Geeta ji, my next question is, you undertook this long walk from Kolkata to Delhi, 1700 kilometers over 70 days. Why did you walk? You met children of all ages along the way. What was the common thread? What was the difference? And how has technology helped bridge this gap?
It was a beautiful journey. I started on February 13th this year and completed on April 23rd. I reached Delhi. I'm going to walk to Dhaka as well, Nidhi. I don't know if you know. I'm going to start in October 22nd, and I'm going across the border to Dhaka. The objective of this walk really was to bring our focus on design. I find that many of us work in cities, in towns, but and architecture has become a little bit of an elitist profession. We find us spending time designing buildings for those who have the money. But what about those who don't have the money and don't need it more than us? And that's something that that was an intent of this walk. I also wanted, and I was very disappointed along the way to realize that nobody had heard the word architect in these smaller towns and villages. So how to build that awareness? This walk was one way of making a noise about it. And I was dressed differently when I walked. I was wearing my walking gear, which is tight, shoes, t-shirt with a bandana. So I had a lot of people coming to me, little children. So I felt like a Pied Piper at times, because there were kids following me and stopping me and wanting to know more. About technology, that's a very interesting question that you asked. So I was able to take this Universe of Architecture course in Hindi to these people for them to be able to access what design is and what this field of architecture is. There is a digital divide. There were many who do not have smartphones. So I had to actually speak to their teachers and probably ask their teachers to be able to make it accessible for them. But at the same time, I think information there is great power in the internet and technology, because A lot of information is percolating down there for them to be able to make informed decisions on their lives, on their careers. But a lot more needs to be done. Needs to be done by my fraternity of architects. We all need to get down there and work with people for them to know that there is a profession called architecture to start with. We need to be working with our construction workers because they are also going to be our ambassadors. So that's also a message I was taking around. But yes, children are similar everywhere. Curiosity is there everywhere. There was so much that I learned from them when I sat and chatted with them. And yes, I'm hoping from the questions today, I will learn something too.
Are there any questions from the children? I'd like to ask the children to ask questions before I take the next one. Yes, we can see Priyanka, Shivastav and M. Sai and Charita and Harshit raising their hands. Yes, Priyanka, we can go with you first.
Thank you very much, ma'am. From first, when I was in the age of 5 years, I really wanted to be an architect. So what do I need to basically focus on to be an architect?
Like I said, start observing when you travel, when you're anywhere, start looking at things around you. How does a space make you feel? How do colors make you feel? So that's on a front of nurturing your love for the profession. As far as getting through the program, getting through to a program in architecture, meaning qualifying to a college, there is an exam called NATA, which is the National Aptitude Test in Architecture, which you need to prepare for. It's conducted, I think, 2 or 3 times a year. Those scores matter. Your class 12 scores matter. And there is a sketching test as well. So when you ask me whether I need to be good at sketching, you are tested in your sketching abilities. You're given you may be asked to sketch a marketplace or sketch a railway station and upload your sketches onto the test platform as well, basis which you get your scores for NATA. The government colleges, as of now, like the IITs, go through the JEE, and colleges like the School of Planning and Architecture, etc., have their the JEE mains too. I think those scores matter, and then the regular counseling that happens is what happens. So yes, you may need to, and the NATA test has a lot of general knowledge and information about architecture that you need to be prepared for. It may not be very high stuff, high level of knowledge, but you'll need to know a bit about proportions, buildings, a little bit of general knowledge.
While designing, I have another doubt. May I ask it?
Yes, sure.
While building buildings, how do I need to focus on the geographical locations like wind, and how do I focus on that?
Okay. So I think you will be guided gently when you join architecture and how you need to do these things. But I think if you look at geography, you look at the soil structure of a place. If it's black soil, if it's red soil, if it's clay, if it's laterite soil like in Kerala, what kind of foundations do they need? Then you look at the climatic conditions. If it's hot, humid, if it's monsoons are going to be heavy in a place, if it's dry, hot and dry like in the deserts, the way you would design in each of these places should be different. Unfortunately, when you ask me this question, it's possible that most of our cities do not look at this. All buildings look similar. Whether you look at Delhi, you look at Jaipur, you look at Hyderabad, most of our buildings are, look similar. But I think they do take care in terms of where your windows should be, which side should they be oriented, how big should your balconies be. It all depends on what the weather conditions are, right? Similarly, materials. Do you want to carry materials over 500,000 kilometers to build, or should you use locally available materials? It becomes cheaper. It kind of defines which place you're building and designing for. So all this you will be taught of once you get into architecture. But yes, I'm happy that you're talking all this, Charita.
Thank you.
Harshit, yes, please ask your question. Yes.
How is wind also playing an important role in architecture?
Yes, wind is playing a very important role. If you're on the 8th or 10th floor and there's heavy wind coming and you've designed it in a manner, or you've not thought about wind, you open your windows. I have known cases where a tablecloth with all its things have flown off, So, I mean, that's a simple, funny example I'm giving, but there are people who can feel the sway on the high floors in Mumbai, for instance. you can actually feel it moving. So yes, wind plays a big, so then you have something called dampers that you use, which many tall buildings use. So I think you're putting the cart before the horse, Charita. You
M.
first have
Sai,
to
is there a question that you'd like to ask? Harshit? Yes,
Harshit,
please.
Harshit.
Please go ahead.
Good morning, ma'am. I am
We have
outside.
63 children here with us in spite of the exams. I'm so grateful. Please write your Google review. I'll keep reminding you that. Yes, please ask your question.
Good morning, ma'am. I am Sai Rishikesh from class 5C from Johnson Grammar School, Hapsigoda, Hyderabad. I love designing. I do practice with sketch where I have gone through global art. At the same time, I'm going to Sipabaka's formats. I love to make different structures with Legos. Hence, my question is, I eager to make 3D or designing of Legos in software. Can I know, do we have any related to that? So that I can download, and practice. Thank you and advice.
So you're talking about software to help you build with Lego. Is that what you're saying? I didn't quite understand exactly what you're.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Build with Lego and things. There are. I'm not sure exactly on these softwares, but if you can drop your email ID here, I will try and find a response for you. But again, in continuation to your question and Charita's as well, I think it's nice that you people are experimenting with these things. How do you prepare to become an architect? Use origami is a beautiful way in which you start working with paper, start, like I said, making models with sand, soil, clay, even paper is something. I'm so glad that many of you are doing this. Sai, you could leave your email behind, or I'll take it from the organizers, and we'll certainly send you a response on what you asked.
Okay, ma'am.
And I'll also probably request schools to also share the names of the schools that have come here. And let me see if I can organize for architecture students to come to your colleges, come to your schools, and probably do some a few sessions for you. That's also something I'll try and do.
Okay, sure, ma'am. Thank you.
Please leave your email in the chat here. Harshit, do you have a question, beta?
Ma'am, chat is disabled. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Any other questions before I go further?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, is NATA exam compulsory to become an architect?
Yes, it is in our country. For, like I said, for the non-government institutions, government institutions are still using JEE Mains 2. For all the private institutions, NATA is mandatory.
Okay, ma'am.
That's stipulated by the Council of Architecture. Like the Medical Council of India, we have something called the Council of Architecture that governs some of these things.
Ma'am, like buildings we see in Japanese animes, ma'am, can we make this in real, ma'am? How can we make this, ma'am? Ma'am, because I like sketching and I'm able to make the sketch, but ma'am, can you make this in real life?
Can you, so like Japanese animation, meaning the ones you see in manga comics and things like that, is that what you're talking about? So let me tell you this, it's interesting that you've come up with this question. A lot of inspiration is taken from, can be taken from fiction as well by architects. So how a specific thing that you're referring to will be made will need research, but there are many people who take inspiration from fiction, from movies, from graphic novels also. So it's vice versa, while writing in novels and cartoons can take inspiration from us who are building current buildings, but it can be the other way around too. So for sure, they can be built, it can be explored. I mean, if you're talking about flying buildings and things like that, obviously is another story. But if you're talking about buildings that collapse, and can be moved to another place, there's lots of these things already happening where, it's just one box, a home in a box. We have students who have actually designed home in a box. In one small box, the whole home fits in, goes to a place and it gets put up. So yeah, so there's a lot that can happen with technology.
Ma'am,
Absolutely. I like to take my other question now. There are enough movies and stories on doctors, engineers, and lawyers, but the architect is not really talked about. How can we make architecture more popular, ma'am?
I wish my fraternity would also realize this as that this is as important. We have we have so many other professions like the doctors all over the place, but I do have a few movies I remember where there is an architect protagonist. There are some shows, TV shows where there are architect protagonists. We really need a Bahubali protagonist to be an architect. But time and technology has progressed. There are many platforms other than movies. There are influencers, YouTubers, podcasters, etc., who we need to use well to spread the word on architecture, where the next generation would look up to. For sure, pop culture and movies are a way to. I don't know how many of you know, there is the biggest award in architecture for an architect in the world, the global award. It's called the Pritzker Award. Pritzker. And about 4 years ago, architect Balakrishnan B. Doshi, who is the, he's like the grand old man of architecture for India, he received the Pritzker Prize. I don't know how many of you have seen the movie OK Kanmani or OK Janu. He is acting in it. The movie is set in an architect's office. Piku, I think the movie Piku had Deepika Padukone as an architect. So we're not doing too badly now. I think in time you will start seeing more people modeling, role modeling, and using architects as protagonists in movies. But yes, a lot more needs to be done.
ma'am,
Absolutely. Yes, there is a question.
ma'am, what are other books for architecture, ma'am? Because I really want to read more about that.
You're talking about fiction, you're talking about information.
Information, fiction, anything.
What class are you in?
I'm in 7th grade.
7th grade. Again, I would recommend you look at this course that I told you about, University of Architecture. It has a whole section on the books you can read, the movies you can watch, and so on also. So it will give you a lot of information on that.
Where will I obtain this link?
I put it on the host and panelists. Will someone be able to post it on the attendees chat, please? I'm unable to do that. Nidhi, will you be able to help us with that?
Yes, absolutely. Another question is, children are sensitive to the place that they are in, as they are in a demographic that interacts with most of their surroundings. How can we start demanding their feedback to start creating more spaces suited to their needs?
I think this is so crucial and so important, If you look at, there is an article which talks about the index of judging happiness in a building or in an apartment complex is to study how happy the children are. And, you'll probably understand how well the apartment complex has been designed. I think it's extremely crucial to create all spaces that are suitable and are accessible to children as well. Very often, you look at your own home, most of the things we say, don't touch this, don't do this, and we should not need to say that if it is designed well. So I think children we really need to look at them as being an index for understanding how well designed a place is. When I talk about inclusivity, when I'm talking about making spaces accessible to different sections, children are going to be one of those, because how safe are our places for children? When you allow them, there was a time I cycled to school. In fact, I'm talking about many, many years ago, in the maybe 1979, 80, 81, I went by cycle to school. It may have just been a 1 kilometer ride. When I go back there today, I shudder to think whether parents of today, I used to live in Hyderabad then, many of you seem to be from Hyderabad. So I shudder to think whether parents would allow their children to cycle today. And that's what we've done to our spaces, our cities. Can children walk safely on our roads? Most places, you say play areas designated and you should not go beyond that. Instead, we should say vehicular area designated, and everything else should be accessible to people. So I think, yes, there is a lot that needs to be looked into on that front.
Absolutely. How much do you think shapes and fiction shapes our ideas for inspiring us? How often do architects turn to it for inspiration?
Like I said, yes, there are many ways in which fiction shapes our ideas of space, and whether it is, I was giving you some examples even in the slides. When you see Hogwarts, or when you see movies, very certainly, people start getting excited. While it works well in some cases, it also unfortunately sometimes helps set the wrong trends. Because there's a TV serial that people are hooked onto and watching, they start wanting their homes to look like that. They don't realize it's a set, and then they actually start demanding a certain aesthetic or a certain way of building from the architect and the designer. And the designer often has to kind of give in if you want your career to move in a certain direction. And so there are a lot of constraints. I mean, this whole thing of what is beautiful, what you like, is also shaped. What the larger population likes is also shaped by what is that population being exposed to through the movies and the fiction and the places, the things that they watch. And then they start aspiring for those things and demanding those things from the designer and the architect. So it works well, but it also works to the contrary at times. Very often, actually.
What about lessons from nature, from tiny anthills in the backyard, or the cuckoo's nest, or climbing trees? How can we start promoting nature, nurturing this behavior from things around us?
So I'm not sure we need to start. There's a lot being done. I mean, if you look at the way people build in our villages traditionally, I think they were extremely sensitive to the environment. There's a term, children, called cradle to cradle that is used in the space of sustainability and environment, which says that something that comes from earth goes back to earth. And that is what cradle to cradle means. And if you look at our homes that were built in the, in villages and built in the old times, they were built with mud. On my walk, I met this set of brothers in a village called Bharra in Madhya Pradesh, where their charpoys were woven with leaves that they picked up from the jungle, and that very easily. So they bring in things from the earth, from the forest, and it goes back into the earth, because the ropes that are made from leaves can go back very easily into the earth and decompose. Their jhadus are made with, they so proudly were showing their jhadus, their home, how much they build, the kaprel, the tiles that they use for their roof, are all made by hand. If you look more from the advancement and technology perspective, there is this style of architecture which not just in architecture but otherwise also you use biomimicry and biophilic design, where you are understanding how, like I said, the anthills and or how the bees make their nests, and understanding that technology and applying it to design. So you start using earthen pots for cooling your spaces instead of air conditioning. So there is a lot that is being done, and so a little study of biophilic design will help you understand that.
Any other questions, children? We are running out of time now. Is there any question before I close? Yes, Priyanka. I'm so glad you're asking questions. Yes. Ayush, please go ahead.
Ma'am, how is Japan living in the future?
How is Japan living in the future as far as architecture is concerned, ma'am?
For sure, Japan is doing a lot of research. So I think science weighs very heavily in the way architecture is looked at in Japan. There are, architects, it's almost looked, in India, we often say architecture is, this whole question or debate is if it's an art or a science. But in Japan, I think it's certainly more of a science. and an art as well. I mean, I think they've really worked very hard at bringing that balance, into being. And I think we need to do a lot also in terms of helping, using science to make certain things sustainable and doable in our using especially in our traditional way of building. And yes, Japan is, I wouldn't say just because they're doing it all scientifically and they're living in the future, it's necessarily the right thing to do also. I think there are so many things that you need to study. We need to study and see what is appropriate for a particular country may not be appropriate for another country or another location. And that also needs to be looked at. I know there are a lot of other questions, Nidhi. I will just leave behind my Insta handle or a Facebook handle or Twitter handle. It is Gita Gita _ethos, ETHOS.
Ma'am, can you repeat that again?
Gita Gita _ETHOS. Okay. I may not respond the minute you send me a question, but I will certainly respond in time.
Is there any last question that I can take before we close, Charita?
Ma'am, as far as concerned for architecture, how is maths and science very important in this?
I think I addressed a little bit of it. You saw the geodesic dome that was built. If you have to build something like that, what do you need? Don't you need to understand how those members of trust? I know you can use an engineer, but as an architect, you at least need to understand to be able to communicate with that engineer, to be able to be sure you're not being taken for a ride. If you're designing earthquake-resistant structures, you need to understand tectonic forces. You need to understand, hence math and physics do become important, at least for you to be able to relate to what you're building.
Which subject is more important in this, ma'am, like science or maths?
There's no such thing. It all comes together, right?
It's a balance.
Yeah, it all comes together. But I'm not saying, I mean, honestly, we don't study math or science once we get into college. There is no math and science beyond the first semester, if at all. Math and physics. It's not even science, it's physics. So there's something called structural mechanics and architectural structures that we start doing as a subject for first 3 years, where you're looking at building structures.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Hi, good morning. I am Sia Patel from Sri Swaminarayan English Medium School, Valoti. I had a question. May I ask?
Yes, sure, Sia.
So actually, when you were like showing slideshows and about like architecture and everything, I had like inspiration and I wanted to ask you something because you said maths and science. Maths is in 12th grade, right?
Yeah, go ahead, Sia.
Hello?
Go ahead with your question.
But I am like weak in maths. So do you have any advice that I can like become a little better in maths because I'm very weak in maths?
So let me just put this clear. I did mention that math and science are required to get through to architecture because 50%, you need to score 50% in your class 12.
Yeah.
That is not too difficult to do, I presume. Unfortunately, our country still doesn't have a system where you have a math 1 and a maths 2, physics 1 and a physics 2, because I don't think the level of maths that we do in 11 and 12 is really required for architecture. So if one is to ensure that you get through, 2 is to be concerned about whether you will cope because you're weak in math, you will cope.
Okay, thank you.
In the 5 years of architecture. That's not going to be an issue at all because there are many who are, I know people who not great at math who have survived and done really well as architects.
Thank
And
you.
on that note, I'd like to thank you, Gita Balakrishnan ji, for sharing your insights with us and sparing your valuable time to be with us. I request all children to share a Google review before we share the certificate, and also give us a good review on Google, and please follow the Instagram handle. And on that note, I'd like to thank you from our CEO, Mr. Srinivas ji. Thank you so much for a very, very inspiring session with the children. And I'm so happy we've ignited young minds. On that note, many thanks for watching. Namaskar.